Hey, welcome to the first Avalonia Connect Live. This is all about bringing the community together. So we wanted to engage with real Avalonia customers, get your feedback, have some live chat, and bring in the comments from all the socials. So feel free to jump on the chat whenever you like. And in the meantime, we will work our way through and introduce our first guest. So I'm Luke. I do a lot of the content for Avalonia. You'll probably see me on other channels doing all the tutorials of how to use Avalonia. I've done WPF since it came out, and that's where I kind of got discovered to help with Avalonia, is the fact that it's based a lot of similarity on WPF. So I'm now officially on the team, and we're doing these live Avalonia Connect videos. So I'll pass it over now to Javier to carry on.
Okay, yeah, hello everyone. We are really excited to continue with okay, sorry, I have some echo from somewhere. But yeah, we are really excited to start our first streaming of Avalonia Connect and the space where we connect and talk with people around the community and around companies using Avalonia, learning how they use Avalonia and getting feedback to keep improving. So today we have a special event because it's our first event with a guest. And today we have with us Daniel Peñalba. He's working at Unity, has been involved in cross-platform development from several years ago, from the origin of plastic days, using Codice Software, a company in Spain that was acquired by Unity, and today working in the Unity control code versioning and all the stuff related with manage Git change, etc. So hello, Daniel, how are you?
Hi, Javier and Luke. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm obviously caught out here. I'm normally in a studio, and I'm in a back garden somewhere in the woods at the minute. So
I
hopefully all the
prefer
sound
your
is okay.
location than mine.
Yeah.
I'm at home, by the way.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm not familiar with your story, basically, from the background. I believe you've made an SCM system, and obviously you work with Unity. So I'd be interested myself to learn a bit about that too.
Sure. I'm Daniel Peñalba. I live in Spain, and yeah, I'm working for Unity Technologies. But we started a company called Codice Software back 20 years old. So yeah, time passes. So and we started version control like Git. Yeah, we started that product for people. It grew a lot, and we specialized in making version control for video games. So we were acquired by Unity, if I remember correctly, in 2020. So so we started to be the official Unity editor version control system. So we are deeply integrated in the Unity editor, but the standalone tools that we started previously are still alive. So part of that is a desktop GUI that is built with Avalonia. So this is what we are covering today.
Nice. What was it like back then trying to handle UI? I know when I used to do WinForms, and I thought WPF was like the best thing ever compared to WinForms. And
yeah.
before that, I think I even started with DirectX when I was doing. I actually started with game development stuff before I did any kind of UI, and you even had to build just canvases to draw anything on the screen. So there was like a week worth of prep before you could even get a rectangle to appear. So I'm sure it's come a long way since then, but I can't imagine the pains of making. Yeah, I can't even remember making UI back then. How painful it was.
Yeah. This is a quite long story. I'll try to summarize and be short, but yeah, 20 years. Imagine 20 years building something. We have a lot of things to say, but in short, this is a exciting project because, as you can imagine, we started 20 years old. We hadn't .NET as we know today, so we had to start with Mono. and it was really a pain for UI toolkits, let's say, because we used the WinForms port of Mono for Linux and MacOS, so basically not working. I mean, it was really, really difficult. So after that, it was good for, of course, for Windows, but we couldn't have that working in Linux and MacOS. So we decided to port it, the Linux and MacOS. I mean, we at the beginning we had a single code base, but not very reliable in terms of quality. So we decided to use GTK Sharp, something more native for Linux, GTK Sharp and Xamarin Mac for macOS, because we didn't want to abandon C# development. That was easy, because most of the common code for the client was developed in C#. So we opt that way. Somehow it worked, but we started to have different difficulties because we were a small company and we started to have the need to maintain 3 different code bases. So yeah, challenge, and different code bases with different testing and hours of testing, because I remember at that times doing UI end-to-end testing. We developed our own testing system that actually clicked the screen. So quite challenged. We after some years we decided we needed to change the model to opt for a single code base model, and we started to dig different frameworks, and we found Avalonia, in fact.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds similar to what I was doing. As I've gone through most of those things as well, the kind of WPF, the Xamarin, again, exactly the same idea. I don't want to abandon C#. I think C# was always the foundation, and we probably led a very similar path to discover Avalonia. I kind of discovered it when it was, I think, very, very early on. And I was amazed by how well it could just design. As silly as it sounds, it's always the same story. I say, if I want a button to just be in the center vertically and horizontally on a canvas, it just does it. And that sounds incredibly simple, but you try that in most of the platforms and you think it works, and then you add one extra thing and then things break. So you end up wasting your time fighting the UI versus you never have to think about UI in Avalonia. That's all the main thing I always stress with it. If you want to design something, I don't look at, say, a prototype UI anymore and think, oh, that's going to be difficult to design. Maybe we'll change the design a bit and not have that. It's not even a consideration. It's so easy to just know that you can make UI and get on with the task of creating your software without the UI being, one of the main blockers, which I think is really beneficial to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the difficulty to maintain different code base was mostly what moved and led the team to discover Avalonia. Can you talk about that a little bit more? What was the first version that you started using? And also, I have curiosity about the initial migration and how difficult it was to moving from GTK Sharp to something using XAML, etc. Was a simple port? Was hard? What was the first experience?
Well, that's a very good question, actually. And we made a decision that actually was smart, I think, because the most modern code base we had, that was Xamarin Mac. And that was built somehow platform agnostic in some ways. But of course, Xamarin Mac is not at all similar to Avalonia, because, for example, if we had a WPF implementation, probably it fits even better. In fact, you have the XPF project, so it's actually that. But in our case, the WinForms implementation was WinForms, and it was a quite old code base, very stable in terms of it was very rigid in terms of maintainability, because it was very maintained. But as you can imagine, 20 old years or 16 years old code base is a little bit hard because not all the things are well written. But we opt porting the most modern code base that was Xamarin Mac. We were lucky that the code well separated between the UI layer and other layers, so it was, let's say, without using an LLM, quite direct. Let's say that. I don't remember how much time we spent, but in a first step, I guess something like I developed. I remember developing the UI layer, basically defining the styles and all the colors, light, dark theme, and so on, because we are not using the default Avalonia theme. We are. It's quite similar, but it's different. So we rewrote all the controls shamils for the styles, right? So the first step was that. Then we port the complete Xamarin Mac tool, form by form and screen panel by panel. So basically that. And then we reached feature parity with the Windows implementation. So in total, I remember doing it in the first migration was like 2 months, and then feature parity we're still finding it as customers are asking, oh, that hidden option in that form is not present, so we add it and we're done. Yeah, but.
So how did it go from it sounds like a lot of it was version control at the start, and then obviously it ended up into Unity. And when you think of Unity, most people think sort of gaming as the main thing. What was the kind of crossover point where it merged and started to get noticed, I guess, by Unity or become officially part of it?
Well, probably for most Unity users, the most important way or the main way of using our product is directly integrating with the editor. We have replicated exactly the same UI in the Unity editor, but we still maintain legacy users not related to gaming at all. So their main entry point probably for using our tool is the CLI and the desktop GUI, that is the Avalonia 1, of course. So yeah, it complements because the Unity integration is equivalent to the Avalonia implementation, but for the Unity implementation, probably we have more. It's more integrated with the editor. But yeah.
Okay, and to get now, we are going to jump to some demos and see the current state of the Avalonia UI, and we would love to know the challenges and the hard parts, etc. But before that, and to put more context to the audience and everybody that maybe is not familiar with version control, Unity, or not used Plastic in the past, can you also explain what was the complex problems or problems that solve Plastic and why it fits pretty well with gaming, where they manage big files and they manage raw files that are not typical, just poor code, etc. Can you give more context about all the features and probably all the different screens that you needed to port, and you mentioned it before, and get a little bit of more context before watching it directly?
Yeah, Unity, I mean, gaming studios tend usually to avoid using Git, right? Git is a fact standard, as we all know, but there are two big, let's say, big issues, or three big issues that game studios have when using version control. The first one is not having a centralized repository. Of course, using GitHub Enterprise or something like that can solve the problem, right? But game studios tend to have that. The second part is game studios have usually all their tooling and the games in the same repo. They use mono repo. That means a super big repository with all the stuff there. So our solution is super scalable. We are pretty optimized to support very large code bases. So this is the second important thing. And the final one, I'd say, is the binary support. Git needs LFS to support files bigger than 100 megabytes, and we support it natively. Files up to, I don't know, terabytes. The limit is the file system for us. So yeah, there are game studios tend to use probably Perforce or probably in the past Team Foundation servers sometimes. But yeah, solutions not being Git. So this is probably the reason we found this hole, and we filled that hole being there in the video games industry.
And I suppose stepping back a little bit as well, it's now quite a large company, but how did you find I always love the startups of companies where we first, you have your idea and you join a company early and things are always a lot more one-on-one in the sense with developers, and you find your roles where you like to be. Where did you tend to find you like to develop? Was it more sort of, did you enjoy the front end stuff, or did you prefer back end, or were you a database guy, or just an all-rounder? Where was your kind of, I guess, passion in development?
Well, at the beginning, everybody did. As I say, we started the company for people, so you can imagine we did everything, even marketing or social network. I don't know, everything. Back end, front end, database, multi-platform. I don't know, everything, because our architecture is not very complex. It's a server. It's then the clients, that is CLI, desktop, whatever. But we have a lot of integrations also with the IDEs. We had Visual Studio integration, Eclipse integration in the past. I don't know, plugins like Maya, whatever. So we developed in different languages, different architectures, also multi-platform. So we did everything at the beginning. But once we started to grow the company, probably we started to specialize. So I went more to the UI part. And I'll say I like more the UI part. Yeah.
Yeah. Me personally, even though I always don't think I'm that good at UI, I can what I'm good at is, say, taking a UI I can see, or a concept that is already existing in a sense, and we want to, say, make something similar. I can always make UI almost pixel perfect, but going from a blank canvas, and that's probably my hardest challenge with anything. I prefer, a back-end encryption challenge than making a button look good. But, again, having the all-round ability, I think it helps a lot in every aspect as well, because I think a lot of the challenges with developers, if they stick to one area and don't become more rounded, I guess, then you can't see enough steps in front of you to predict things that could happen. And I think it's nice to be at the start of a company, see every aspect of it, and then even when you specialize, you always have in the background the knowledge to realistically do any other part if you needed to, but you've got your pleasure to focus on what you like, I guess, as well.
Yeah. I'm enjoying a lot doing. I love my job because it's quite challenging, and sometimes it looks repetitive in terms of the following. It's implementing the same 3 times or 4 times, but this is amazing. You end learning a lot, because you need to solve exactly the same problem with different technologies, and you learn which technologies are better, worse, what are key points, difficult caveats of everything. So I love doing that. For example, writing the branch explorer, that is, as you said, a canvas with virtualization, and we need to display, millions of objects in a screen, so we need to use virtualization and resolve it with a quad tree only to know which objects are intersecting which parts of the screen and so on. Okay, implement a quad tree probably is obvious, but see how to virtualize and what are the advantages or disadvantages of using some immediate modes or not. I mean, we implemented the branch explorer probably in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different technologies. So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you learn a lot. So I love it.
Yeah, definitely. You go so deep in specific issues that we usually not go so deeper in JIT knowledge or how to solve some specific actions. It's like when we implement something like a testing framework, or we implement something like virtualization, and you need to pass a lot of time just iterating and testing and invalidating and ensuring that everything is working exactly as perfect as possible. It's like not usually. You know that the Avalonia developer sometimes will use that or will implement a custom testing framework by themselves, but mostly everybody will just pick the official working framework and just implement the test on top of that. So have the possibility of go so deeper in that knowledge and iterate, even if it's a repetitive task. I got that feeling too. It's amazing because you can go deeper and get acknowledged that usually you are not able to spend so much time.
Yes, this is not normal. I mean, if you are using you are working in a, let's say, normal project, and you choose the right tools, for example, TypeScript and some front end. This is multi-platform. It works for every browser, and you're done. So you don't need to do that. But well, in our case, we probably not choosing the right technology at the beginning forced us to implement it in WinForms, GTK#, Xamarin Mac, then SWT for Java, for Eclipse. Then we port it also for Unity, that is in Wii. It has 2 technologies in Wii and UI Toolkit. So the nature of our project forced us to explore all that paths, but it's super interesting. If we were choosing Avalonia at the beginning, probably we didn't learn that WinForms, that GTK and so. But yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So what do you think if we jump to see a little bit of the current state and taking a look to screens, etc.? We'd love to know more where you find, for example, or Avalonia was a surprise because work get maybe better as expected, or maybe compared with the previous experience, or where maybe you need to create something totally custom, or you need to go deeper and create a custom control implementation or something to fit with what you want to manage or display.
Well, we have. Do you want to share the screen? Do you want me to share the screen so we can cover it?
Yeah, I think that that's better, right? Let's see.
Okay.
Let's talk about different topics and maybe with some examples and get some examples on the screen. I think that could work better. So if you can share your screen.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I'm going to share now. You are displaying currently the Unity version control.
Yeah, this is the Avalonia implementation, right?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, in general, you can see here quite basic tool in terms of controls. I mean, this is the 3 data grid control to visualize the workspace contents. Probably here in the pending changes, this is again a standard controls, but here, as you can see, there are quite custom controls like this, for example, image deep viewer, so you can switch between these modes on your screen, side-by-side differences, right? So here you can see left and right, or compare side-by-side with zoom in, animations, full animations, and so on. Differences, we have an algorithm to calculate image differences to see what changed. And swipe, that is just doing this. So yeah. Also, we have, okay, let me show you something, probably independent changes. Okay. Yeah, we use Avalonia Edit to visualize file differences. You can edit here, of course. So this is a plain differences viewer, like a Git one. We opt to have side-by-side viewers, not inline viewers, because we liked more having this kind of viewers. But yeah, and we developed an open source project that is called TextMate Sharp to support the syntax highlight here, right? So you can select we support all these languages here, right? So yeah, and this is quite not standard controls. We developed this all this UI to navigate the differences and so on. More things. We built our UI for scalability. I mean, as I said previously, we support super huge code bases. I mean, this is our production code, and probably here we have I don't know because millions of lines of code. I don't know, it's more near to 2 or to 3 because I don't remember now the metric. We had it in the past, but as you can say, finding the pending changes is quite super fast. Exploring this is super fast. For example, the search is almost immediate. So yeah. The reason is we have super polished algorithms on the back end, but also on the front end, we support virtual. Every control is virtualized. So it's mandatory, and it was an interesting decision when we jumped to Avalonia to ensure that everything is virtualized, to ensure everything is going quite well in terms of usability. Another custom visualization probably is the branch explorer that you can see it here. Let's zoom out a bit. Here you can see the whole history in a diagram. So basically, these things are branches. So you can click a branch and here see the differences, the attributes, and so on. And each bubble here is a change set made by like a commit, Git commit. So yeah, quite useful in terms of exploring the repository. These green lines are merge. This is a merge, okay, merge link. And these are tags, okay. All this visualization is custom. Of course, it has virtualization again, and yeah, and we support also the dark theme. So, but yeah, all is custom, right? So yeah, this is pretty it. I mean, the tool is super big, super big, but basically the interesting parts are these ones.
Yeah, that looks really cool. With the main view there, where you're showing off all the branches and lines, I presume that's obviously entirely a custom control. Have you managed to sort of still bind that with like MVVM, which is sort of almost forced in the XAML style UI?
Yeah, that's tricky because we are not using MVVM, but somehow we are using that pattern. I mean, we have the data classes defined in a separated assembly, and we basically connect it to the UI that way. But we're not using bindings to display the properties. So we are not using pure MVVM model, but somehow.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was even contemplating looking at it myself, thinking that's one hell of a challenge you've managed to do there. If you've done it with pure MVVM, because of the amount of architecture there would be
in fact, let me I can show, let me see if I can show you the branches per implementation in Unity, but because it's exactly the same, but we are only replacing the UI layer. So probably I can, how can I, okay. I stopped sharing, right? And
Right.
let me share now the Unity window. 1 second, it's loading. But yeah, in the meantime, we're not, just a clarification, we're not probably being the best, we are not applying the best of the recommended patterns by the Avalonia team, because I always note that when talking to the development team, it's like how you're using this, and we shared some pieces of code, and why are you using that way? And yeah, sorry for that, but it's a big story. And the reason is probably we port the code, and it was easier to port that way rather than using MVVM and bindings and so on. So yeah.
Oh no, I think that's the sign of the next stage in development. Is I always kind of try and teach that as well, that the recommended patterns and the standards are there for almost guidelines, or for people that have been there before in different industries, and what works for one company might not work for another, and you need to never forget really the goal of the software is to do its job more so than be ever formulated in a certain way or style. So if you have developers skilled enough in that way of coding and it works for you, then there's no point trying to adhere to certain standards for the sake of it. You can adhere to them if you start to find out that your code causes you more problems than it's solving. So it's nice to see other developers doing, very similar thing, not being too worried about not following standards.
Yeah.
Most of what I do is not standard at all, but then you can use standards where they fit in. It's all about what works, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. This is tricky because sometimes it looks like you are going the opposite direction sometimes, but if you find a way of doing the things that works for you, and it's not, crazy or is broken in all the time, it's perfectly fine, I think. Oh, well, this is a good example of it. As you can see, the data loading is exactly the same. So here in this is the Unity implementation of the Branch Explorer, exactly the same graph. So here we are only replacing the top layer. We are using UI Toolkit for this with virtualization, so it's a re-implementation only of the part. But yeah, it's a good effort because you need to re-implement the menus and probably the selection, all the stuff, right? And yeah, this is the deep viewer for the Unity integration. But yeah, it's working exactly the same. But this is our approach to MVVM. The data model is defined in a separated assembly, so we reuse that. In this case, for example, we reuse all the rectangles in a native format, X, Y, width, height. So we abstract the rectangle representations, the colors, and so on. So everything is defined there, and only the UI layer is reading that values and repainting, let's say. So yeah. Ideally, probably an Avalonia implementation for Unity. I know that there is a Godot implementation for displaying Avalonia controls inside Godot. Probably we could have an Avalonia integration into Unity, and we could avoid defining the UI again for these kind of things. But probably for this, we still need to do it, because this is the text layer is absolutely re-implemented in Unity. So well, we need to engineer it, basically finding the right solution to display it.
Out of all those UIs, you've got quite a lot of complex UIs in one one single application. You've got your obviously your text diffing, your image diffing, you've got your graphs. What would you say was the hardest thing to do in Avalonia or in any UI platform, I guess, in terms of custom UI? Because most of what you do there seems custom UI. So you've actually got a ton of experience in just handling those kind of flows. Have you struggled with anything specifically in any platforms, or is it all second nature to you now you've done it for so long?
Well, I'd say it depends on the platform. I remember doing custom controls when using WinForms, being very hard to not implement, to make them work as expected. I mean, for example, when you use WinForms to define something clickable, if it was really tricky to restyle the button, right? So if you put an image or something, then you had to implement yourself the click, the mouse, enter, the mouse hovering, the shortcuts, using the space key to actually send the click and so on. So, for example, doing that in HTML or in Avalonia, it's really helpful because you can restyle the button class and actually it's much simpler. So it depends on the UI. Talking specifically for Avalonia, I'd say that the most difficult thing to do but this is not difficult. It's a big amount of work is maintaining the UI toolkit because it's totally re-implemented from scratch. But this is our problem. I mean, we are matching a style we had in the past, so we could use the Fluent theme, and we would.
And what could help you to manage the UI in a better way? What if you can request something, will be something like, I don't know, better UI testing, UI deming. What tool or what stuff would you need to do it in a better way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, there are probably I can even think more in the previous question and probably say that the most difficult part is designing code that is well testable. I mean, the tricky part around it is if you start to mix the layers, probably writing good unit tests is quite tricky. But if you define the code in a good way, using interface to allow to mock and services, put all the services behind interfaces, then not mix the model classes and the UI classes and so on, probably it's easier to go. We found, generally speaking, we struggled to have a good UI testing for GTK Sharp, WinForms, and so on. I remember using Test Complete, that it was a UI testing framework, and we had hours of testing, but we found really big difficulties using it because we had to run the tests in a virtual machine, because otherwise, while you are testing the UI in your machine, you are locked because the mouse and the keyboard are locked by the testing tool. Nowadays, probably with the CI systems that are much modern, it's quite better that way. But in any case, if you need to debug end-to-end testing, I found it really difficult to have. So using Avalonia and the headless platform with no windows and having 6,000 tests passing in 4 minutes, for me, is the solution. I mean, everything can be mocked, everything can be tested without windows and so on. Probably you need 1 or 2 end-to-end testing for some validate you actually have something that actually works. I mean, in the end term, but for me, it's the solution. I mean, I'm in love with that solution. There is no other product in our code base that is so good, like passing probably with I don't know exactly the coverage, but probably we have more than 50% of coverage of the code, the UI code, I mean, passing in 4 minutes. So that's perfect.
Pretty good. Let's mix with the question from the audience and the people watching us. And we have a question from YouTube, and the question is, any UI library built by Unity that is available for use, open source? I guess that is more related with UI or Avalonia, because at entire level, I guess it's something bigger. But if you can talk about it a little bit.
Yes, Unity has a couple of libraries. Not sure if they are open source. I would say they are not open source, but they are shipped with Unity. And in fact, Unity supports, if I remember correctly, 3 platforms. The first one is InWi, that is an immediate mode rendering toolkit. The second one is UI Toolkit, that is similar to Avalonia. I mean, it's quite similar, in fact. It has the equivalent to Shamil is USS, if I remember correctly, how you style the classes and so on. It's quite similar to CSS, to HTML CSS. And the other one is UWI, that is the third one. But if I remember correctly, this is for runtime when running a game. So for the editor, you have 2 modes, InWi and UI Toolkit, but it's included with Unity. So it's like being open source, not open source, but used for free. I mean, yeah.
I guess touching on that as well with game development, I suppose, as well. It's one of the things that most of us don't get to do for a living or to earn money from. So I suppose, how would game development differ mainly for us developers that have only ever done sort of commercial work, if you will, like non-game development? I suppose there's a completely different lifestyle and format of coding, and as you mentioned, like the source controls quite a bit different, with it mostly being large files, I guess, for game development. What's the kind of main differences, would you say, between game development and application development or business applications?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I'd say it really depends on the nature of the studio or the company. But generally speaking, Unity tends to have indie developers or small studios working with them, also big, of course. And I'd say that version control usage is much extended in the general development, general application development, more than in the game industry. The reason is that the game industry mixes developers, of course, but artists, a lot of artists working on the project, and the artists are not used to use Git or version control and have a strong knowledge of good patterns or good practices when using version control. So I'd say that from the version control perspective, probably there are more knowledge in general application development. In terms of life cycles, patterns and so on, it heavily depends of the nature of each studio or company. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question from the chat, but I guess this one is more for us than for Daniel. because the question is, guys, I really enjoy Avalonia live streamings. When do you usually do them? Any events coming up in the next few days? Thanks. So this is a new streaming that we are starting. I know that Steven, Mike, sometimes in the year do some live questions, answering questions from the community and talking about progress and upcoming stuff, etc. And we want to do this a regular streaming where every time we get a guest from the community, from a company using Avalonia, and get some conversation use around how discovered Avalonia, how use it, some learnings that maybe can share with the community, etc. So you can expect more events like this with more companies and more people from the community. We don't have specific dates to share. Of course, as soon as we have it, we will share it. So what I mean is like, we don't have the next one, but you can expect a next one in the next probably month or weeks with another guest. So that's what we will try, as always, as we can sync agendas and timings, because always is something that we need to do. But yeah, definitely we want to get more interactions, more streamings, and more feedback with the community, with companies, with everybody, and exchange more experience and exchange more possibilities around the framework. So that's the idea. I hope that that answered the question. And yeah, keeping iterating around how everything is working with Avalonia. You have a really deep experience, we can say, at cross-platform level, and you work it and play with several workarounds with different frameworks like WinForms, from Mono, GTK Shard, etc., and lately Avalonia. If you want to share like advice or a recommendation from someone in the audience working with cross-platform, and if can be specifically with Avalonia, what would be? What's your core recommendation?
Okay, in our case, Avalonia helped to solve most of our issues. We had 3 different code bases, difficult to maintain, a lot of hours of flaky UI testing, and probably outdated frameworks. I mean, if you want to focus using something that looks native, probably this is not the way to go, because of course we had native GTK UI, native macOS, let's say, what's the name of the UI framework? Cocoa, right? Cocoa look and feel. But in the other hand, I think this is a trend to have a single look and feel for the applications across all the platforms. I mean, this is starting to be a standard with the use of Electron, that they are web applications, and also, I don't know, almost everything is or Visual Studio Code, or I don't know, Git Kraken, or right there. I don't know. They share the same UI experience across all the platforms. So I think it's starting to be a standard. So in our case, it was good. And also maintaining a single style, single code base for all the 3 platforms is amazing. I mean, it helped to solve all of our issues. And also doing the UI testing using NUnit, using the headless platform, helped to resolve the other part of the bottleneck that was spending hours and hours maintaining the tests and fixing flaky tests, and hours passing them. So my recommendation for anyone in the audience that is probably not using Avalonia and figuring out if porting, try it. I mean, it helped to resolve all our problems, and I'd say it's a modern technology. I mean, this is another good stuff. Probably WPF was a great step in terms of how to say that, versatility, right? WinForms quite rigid. Probably Xamarin MacOS, as is totally one-to-one with the native implementation, is quite rigid in terms of versatility. But yeah, Avalonia is more similar probably to web development in terms of you can write good UIs in terms of having reusing controls, styling controls to other controls, and being functional, and okay, all this stuff. So yeah, that's my view.
Nice recommendation. And it's pretty exciting to see how, while we are getting close to the end, more and more people it's interacting in the chat. So that's a signal that the conversation it's getting interesting. We have used a comment from Phil Cordas saying that this is especially true for classic desktop application. You really don't need to native UI. You generally want the office look 90% of the time. So yeah, this is just a comment following up your recommendation. And then we have a comment from Jose Silva that is really interesting. We don't touch a common topic around all the conversations lately, and it's AI. And the question is if you use any MCP server tool during development, and if you recommend anyone, something like Context7 or other MCPs focused on documentation, code navigation, or AI-assisted workflows. And I want to puntualize something here, sharing that we have at Avalonia 2 MCPs. One of them is related with documentation, just giving all the context from the documentation to the LLM. And the other one, it's more interesting because it's part of the tools, and because allow mostly to get screenshots, get the hierarchy, interact from an LLM to the Avalonia application running, and that's especially interesting to get better response and better interactions with it, getting more context, mostly getting what's happening, getting the hierarchy match, etc. So this is what we have so far, and we have ideas and are constantly thinking about improve the framework, improve the developer tools, etc. But let me translate this question to you, Daniel. Do you use at Avalonia today some MCP servers tools?
Specifically speaking to Avalonia, exactly what you say. Both using the dev tools to interact with the visual tree. It's quite interesting because you can even have a mock-up from the designers and iterate, tell the LLM to iterate to have exactly the margins, the colors, and all working like that. So it's quite interesting to use the DevTools MCP and also the documentation one to basically have all the usage of the API directly injected into the LLM. And yeah, we could start an AI talk now, but this is not the moment.
No, this is space for an entire new event, so we can meet and talk about it in another streaming. But yeah, for today, let's keep the focus on Avalonia, and we are close to the end. So let me just share a big thank you to you to spend your time with us, explaining in a short amount of time, because I know how difficult it is to summary
20 years in 1 hour.
Exactly. 20 years of cross-platform development with different frameworks, with different problems, with different situations in a short amount of time in a really, really good way. So really, We really appreciate your time, your experience, and all your feedback around Avalonia. We are not alone because the feedback in the chat is also thanking you all your time. I'm just trying to make a little bit of more time. In any case, that someone have a final question. If someone have a final question, we can share it. Let's wait a little bit of seconds, and if not, yeah, thank you all for joining today to this live streaming. We are getting more and more live streamings with the community, with companies using Avalonia. We will probably keep improving during the time with more probably repeated sections or questions or interactions with the community and with everybody. But I hope that if this first streaming with a guest has been good enough to enjoy it. We really enjoyed our time with all of you and with Daniel. And yeah, because I cannot see new questions, Daniel, if you want to just say goodbye to the streaming, let's end with that.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this chat. You and the development team are amazing, so thank you. I'm pleased to do this, and count of me for future. I don't know, whatever you want to chat. Probably to start to talking about AI or the future of the UI frameworks, or if we will have, I don't know, code in 6 months.
Hopefully, yes. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all. Luke, if you want a final word.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you didn't mind, one more question. It was something I've been thinking while you guys have been talking. Is there's, I guess, on my side more, not necessarily always software related, because I do other things than just software. But I always find there's some things that you find were very challenging to you as a person, or to do something or invent something that you end up being really proud of, but the end result, people can't appreciate how much went into something. And I wondered if you had a similar experience in like the software world or the UI world, where, you know, one little piece of UI maybe was incredibly difficult that you solved in a really impressive way, but you almost had to keep the pride to yourself because nobody understood the technical challenge, if that makes sense. I find there's like certain products or certain things I'll solve and I'm like really proud of myself, but nobody understands it, and it can be a little bit frustrating because you're the guy that invented or solved something, or, you know, you've got a lot of emotion tied to one solution that you feel proud of. And I figured if that was something you had that you'd maybe like to just share as a little bit of something that if people see then in your software can appreciate more.
That's I'd say I always like to explore new paths. I mean, for example, and probably it's interesting to post in the video comments. As an exploration, I did a 3D viewer or model viewer in Avalonia. So I'm in love with UI development. I defend this job as a profession, as a professional responsibility for the UI guys to tell the others, hey, ours is even more important, not more, but it's at the same level. I mean, doing a good job here with the UI, it's super important. I mean, a polished UI that works well is quite difficult to achieve. Sometimes it's even more lines of code writing the UI than writing the backend, right? So yeah. And regarding your previous comment, yeah, I love doing that. I developed a 3D viewer in Avalonia just for fun. So I open sourced it. So probably I will post the GitHub repository on the video comments. So if one wants to take a look, it will be
please share with us, and we can just include it in the video description. We will share some links, and that could be one of them.
Okay.
Nice, yeah, I'll definitely check that out.
Okay, so if we don't have new questions, I think that we reached the end of the event. As we said, we will continue with new ones. We will announce as soon as possible. So let's pay attention, keep in touch, and see you all soon. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Luke, and goodbye.
Bye bye.